Good evening, everybody. I call to order the Bethany City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 16th, 2019. Please stand for the invocation and the flag salute. Mr. Goodwin, will you pray for us? And Mr. Todd, will you lead us in the flag salute?
Dear God, we thank you for this night. Thank you for all who have joined together in this process. And we ask for wisdom and guidance, decisions, conversation, and look forward to the day ahead.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight we have a couple presentations before we get started. One is for Jose Avila, for his 15 years with the city. Does Jose happen to be here? I was told he may not be here. The other one is for Mr. Berkeley Penner, for his 25 years with the city.
I don't think I got a standing ovation. Just glad to get rid of me.
And we are so thankful that Mr. Berkeley Penner is with us, doing what he does. Item 1 is the consent docket, A through F. Do I have a motion?
May I ask for item D to be pulled and voted on separately, please?
Okay.
And then I would make a motion for items A1A, B, C, E, and F for approval.
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item D. Did you have a question?
No, I just wish that it be voted on separately.
Okay. Do I have a motion for item D? She just wanted to be separate. It is approval of mayor's vote for nominees Jeff Knapp and Jeremy Frazier to the Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group Board of Trustees.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2. It's a public hearing item. Consideration and possible approval of ordinance number 1972, an ordinance amending Title 15 by repealing Chapter 157 of the Bethany Code of Ordinances pertaining to airport height restrictions and providing for repealer and servability and declaring an emergency. I do have a report. Would you like my explanation of this before we ask if anybody is here to speak on this? I was looking at this. I met with our city engineer, Mr. Caton, and talked to him at length about this. I went before P&Z at the last P&Z meeting, and they unanimously voted to approve this and send it on to council. In 1960, if those of you who don't know, Chapter 157 and Title 15, in 1960, Bethany created a self-imposed height restriction on our city, mainly in front of the airport property. Many of you know that over the years we have tried to work with the Airport Trust and try to talk them into working with us so that we could develop the frontage of airport property, much like SNU has ball fields there, so that we could develop something that generated sales tax, because everybody knows that sales tax is the lifeblood of the cities and municipalities in the state of Oklahoma. If you didn't know that, let me just reiterate that. We don't get ad valorem, and so we live and breathe on sales tax. The FAA, in looking at this, and Hank and I looked at this, shows a 250-foot restriction from the end of runways. There are some reports that show that now the FAA is saying it's more like 150 feet because they understand there are new developments and what we're dealing with. We are in a process of revitalizing Route 66 and have been joined by 3 other cities in this process, and eventually, Lord willing, we may be taking over Route 66, our portion of it, off the books from ODOT, where we would control it and maintain it. Obviously, to be able to afford to maintain it, we need more sales tax, and we're limited, being 5.2 square miles, where we can do that at. So that's why I went to the P&Z to kind of share with them an idea. The idea I would like for you to think about is, once we take this off of ODOT's hands, the Route 66, knowing that the airport is not excited about working with us to generate development for sales tax purposes for the good of our city, what if we had repealed this or vacated this, Chapter 157, and then we redeveloped a section of Route 66 in front of the airport property? What if we brought all of the north lanes that are westbound south of the drainage ditch and used up all of our right-of-way, which would then be all of our right-of-way once we take it off ODOT's hands? Mr. Caton shares with me that that would potentially leave us 350 to 425,000 square feet on the north side to develop for what could be mixed use, Bethany's first mixed use, where we could create 3- and 4-story tall mixed use buildings for retail, office space, and things that benefit our city. This may be lofty, it may be crazy, it may never happen because obviously it would be very expensive. But I think it's time that we as a city start making bold moves and bold decisions to try to better our city. I am not one to set back hoping that something will happen, that a market will drive something. I am one that am willing to push to try to make something happen. We have sat around for decades hoping that something would happen for us. It's time, in my opinion, that we make something happen for ourselves, that we make decisions that are in the best interest of our city and our citizens and our future. And though this may sound a little crazy, I think it's doable. And if we never do develop the north-westbound lanes on that area in front of the airport property, vacating this, ask yourself the question, what does this do for the south side of Route 66 frontage? All those businesses along there. What does it do with other parts of the city? We have to start making decisions in our best interest. And that's why I'm asking that the council would consider and vote to vacate Chapter 157. There is a quote that says, that I like, that says, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends upon the unreasonable man." George Burnett Shaw. I may be a bit unreasonable, but if I'm going to be unreasonable, I'm going to be unreasonable trying to benefit the city and the citizens of Bethany. And I'd ask this council to do the same. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone from the public who would wish to speak on this behalf, on this item? Yes, ma'am. If you would please step to the microphone in the middle on that step over there and state your name and address. Either mic could probably work. That mic will work.
Oh, this one will work?
Yeah, that'll work for you.
Because it's little for me. I am glad to hear that you are willing to be brave and do things for Bethany. I've been 20 years trying to get Bethany to do something very brave. Our sales tax is being, when our founding fathers put that sales tax geographic limit on everything and forced people to buy within their cities and made the lifeblood only within the city limits, that was when we didn't have cars. Okay, things have changed, and now our money, anybody who's in Bethany, unless you want very little, like, clothing, just very little of anything, you have to buy as a Bethany resident outside of Bethany. We all know that. We also know we've been beating our heads against the wall trying to bring retail sales to come in here when we're not in a good market location for retail sales. However, I worked with Representative Key, and we looked at a lot of the different alternatives, and lifting that requirement to put it into like one big pot and it just gets divided the same way gasoline tax, sales tax money gets divided, is doable, very inexpensive to implement because the math is already there. And we were looking at reports where for anywhere from 20 years ago, 2 million to 4 million and more a year is what we are letting Oklahoma City and Yukon and other people have. If that was in our coffers right now, we wouldn't be in the shape we're in. So the really big, brave move is to get us taxation with representation, get our money back, get that law changed.
Thank you. Do you have anything particular to this item?
Well, yeah, because we're talking about trying to take on some big burdens, but we're still talking about trying to make it happen by making something more viable to retail sales when we're overlooking the bigger issue. Why not just get our sales money back? We might not have to put ourselves in some very dangerous, precarious positions, is my point.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll need your name and address right here.
Sorry.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak particularly to the height restriction? And tonight we'll have 3 minutes for anyone in the public hearing items wishing to address the council. (2A) is approval of ordinance number 1972 on reading by title only. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item B is approval of sections 1 through 3 of ordinance number 1972. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Is this not open for discussion by the council?
Do you have a question?
I have a comment.
Should you have done that before item A, or is this okay to do at item B? Okay. Do you have a comment?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Reading over the planning and zoning minutes of this issue, I understand that the chairman made a comment that he believes that anything done in this area would have to be reviewed by the FAA. Having had experience with the FAA in moving the world, I can tell you that there are some very stringent considerations over there that they have to approve. My question on this is, are we getting the cart before the horse until we have all of the information that we need to know? Are we making this change without the blessing of FAA first? I can't support this until we know more.
The FAA has a application that I'll be glad to let you look at. because like David Davis said, the attorney at the P&Z, he saw no downside to this because a developer would need to fill this out and get the FAA's approval to be able to build what they wanted to build.
It's not just height, it's also lighting and other factors
Correct.
that are involved.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be this application right here. Do I have a motion for 2B, sections 1 through 3? We had a motion and a second? Yes. Please cast your votes. Item C is the emergency section. No. Item 3 is a public hearing item for the purpose of giving members of the public an opportunity to be heard prior to any vote on the proposed Northwest 39th Gateway project plan. Again, you will have 3 minutes with this timer once you begin speaking. I will say that this is something that we have been working on with the Center of Economic Development. If I always mess that, the name of that, the bachelor group is what I always want to call it, who are the experts within our state anyway of TIFs. And so this is something we've been working on for quite some time. I've heard it said that people feel like we're rushing something through, and this is actually something that's been underway for probably a year. And so with that said, is there anyone in the public would like to speak on this item? Please state your name and address. And again, you'll have 3 minutes. And I will say that if there are any questions or anything that needs to be clarified, because there is a lot of misinformation going around that is just not factual, our Economic Development Director, Hank Moore, will be glad to speak on that, or Jeff Sabin from the Bachelor Group.
Good evening. Is this actually on? Okay. Can you hear me?
Barry, is that on?
Okay. Are we on now?
They're not good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in your public meeting. I'm Cynthia Rogers. I'm a professor of economics from the University of Oklahoma. I also serve on the State's Incentive Evaluation Commission. I'm on a bunch of committees for the city of Norman, and I'm on the editorial board of a couple of academic journals. I've studied and contributed to the literature, and it's an extensive literature on economic development policy, including TIFs. And from that mountain of literature, I shared this with council earlier today, I've boiled this down to 7 key points for you to consider before you engage in tax increment financing projects. Number 1, TIF funding is public spending. It's not magic money. It's a spending of your tax dollars on projects that you designate, or sometimes you just put it in a fund to designate it later. 2, there's a lot of TIF spending benefits a lot of players. A lot of these players are private players like the Center for Economic Development Law that makes money administering your TIF. Bond lawyers, property owners, developers, investors, bankers, builders, realtors. All these private parties make money. Sometimes that intersects with public interest and sometimes it doesn't, so you need to be aware of that. 3, if you build it, will they come? There's a lot of talk about sales tax. I know it's really hard for small communities to attract sales taxes, but that's mostly market-driven, demand side. So if you build it, will they actually come? Will private investors come? Will shoppers come? 4, it's very easy to make promises at the front end. The experts that you are dealing with, the Center for Economic Development Law, came to Norman in 2005, made some promises about a retail lifestyle center with high-end retail and entertainment and shopping centers. We still haven't had 1 square foot of that was built by the private developers. Not one, 0 square feet. It's easy to shift TIF activity away from other areas in your community to the TIF district, so you could end up shifting things, duplicating existing stores, siphoning off from your other businesses. If you shift activity, it can hurt your other areas. So if you drive down to Norman and you look at the Ed Noble Parkway, there's 7 properties there. They're up for auction. Their value has dropped by about $4 million since the TIF started. Some of that is due to the TIF, some of it's due to other factors. 6, it's really easy to make your increment grow. That doesn't mean your overall tax dollars.
That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'll give her my time. I'll give her my time.
I'll give her my time.
Okay. Hold on, make note of who all gave their time up.
May I ask, this
I'm an expert.
sound is not good, okay?
Oh,
It's scratchy.
I
Is
can
it
come up
possible for her to stand down here?
I don't care. Yeah, that's fine.
I
with
mean,
me.
if it's not too much trouble. It's scratchy.
No problem.
Much better, thank you.
I thought I could do it in 3 minutes, but I'm a professor, so 3 minutes is hard. So I've looked at Norman's TIF. We did move activity away. Norman's overall tax trend has not increased. There's no TIF bump because it was retail and commercial development, so we moved a lot of activity around. I can show anybody the data on that if you want. Number 7, it's easy to neglect best practices, and I'm afraid the city of Norman did that, and lots of communities do this. Best practices say that TIFs should be targeted and temporary, transparent, accountable, and involve a democratic process where there's significant public input. Due diligence requires that you should look at a range of possible outcomes, best, average, worst case scenarios, not just the, hey, it works like magic. Also requires that you should also require private investment to be upfront, not down the road, or you're left like Norman. We're still waiting for the private retail regional draw. So Norman could not get its regional draw that was promised in 2005. And then the third is you should get independent economic analysis by folks who don't have a vested interest in this particular transaction. So those are the advice I can give you. I have hard copies of this. I emailed it to all of council, and anybody else that wants it, I have some extra copies. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
My name is Stephen Ellis, and I'm also a professor at the University of Oklahoma. I'm in the philosophy department, which I know is a little weird to have an expertise in this area, but my actual research is mostly in decision theory, which is relevant, and I also put together the business ethics curriculum for the Price School of Business. So one of the reasons why I'm interested in this is because of the ethical implications of it. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in particular was the financial impact statement that was created for both of the TIFs. The one in particular on issue right now, I think is a nice example of where it looks as though there may not have been sufficient due diligence done, or at least reported. I mean, I think that's really the issue here for publicity. The TIF document that we're discussing here doesn't really talk very much about particular programs. It kicks the can down the road as to what the development process will be. And despite that fact, it still claims to be doubling the ad valorem tax take in the area, which is a little bit unclear how that is supposed to work. And transparency, I think, requires that those numbers be made available. The second 2 points, which were also in the email that I sent you, it's very, very easy to make a mistake when you're evaluating a tax increment financing program if you don't take into account the growth in the area that is likely to happen anyway. They sometimes call that the but-for condition. failing to neglect the but-for condition means that you miss some of the costs of a TIF because you are freezing ad valorem where it's at. So you actually are giving something up whenever you adopt a TIF. You're giving up the natural increase. And there's a very thin wedge between not having anything go there, which is, I think, everybody's concern, but also it not being developable at all, right? So in order to make a TIF work, it's got to be the case that the financing creates something that wouldn't happen otherwise. And the burden to show that that's likely to happen in your city is large. And it's not as though it's costless to ignore that issue. You either end up giving away a lot of your money, or what happens is what happened in Norman, is that you shift business from inside your city to the TIF area in a way that doesn't create net new growth in the town, but you just lose some of the income because they vacate. So it's very important that you get the economic details right here. And from what we've seen, those details have not been provided, at least in the public documents yet. So I hope that maybe at least things will slow down a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jill McCartney, and I am the CEO of the Chamber, located proudly here in Bethany for 80 years. And first of all, I want to thank the folks from Norman at OU for coming to our city tonight to visit us. That's very nice. I'm an OU graduate, and I'm always glad to see some fellow Sooners. Boomer. But living here and being a part of this community and hearing them talk about the growth that's occurring naturally. Folks, the last 20 years, it's not been occurring naturally. We need a stimulus. TIFs work in places where that growth would not occur naturally on its own. And just like you were saying, sometimes we've got to push a little bit. We are seeing the communities around us flourish that are using this. Norman had a natural intake, a natural uptick that was happening anyhow. It's a different situation. We know that the conditions of our market are such, Bethany's population in 1980 was 20,000, and it's right around that today. We physically don't have any more space to grow unless we do some unusual creative things, and we need the tool, the incentive of the TIF to make a difference. If we do not have that, it's likely we will be here for another 20 years, or maybe some of the people from other places would get their wish and our community our city would not exist anymore. I think none of us are for that. We want to make sure that Bethany continues, and we need a strong tool like the TIF, like all the TIFs, to give us something that we can use as a bargaining tool and to create those incentives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I'm Chris Powell. I'm a Bethany resident. Those few of you who have been following the recent proceedings regarding the tax increment financing program have heard a great deal from the attorneys of the Center for Economic Development Law through the prosecution of the process. Tonight is the only opportunity for citizens and business owners of Bethany to speak in our defense. Despite the rosy scenarios painted by the city's hired attorneys as to the prospects of the TIF corporate welfare proposal, numerous studies have shown that these schemes are rife with problems. Taxes gathered by the program are redirected away from schools, citywide services, and other functions of local government to allow city officials to use the money to support their chosen developers. Across the country, TIFs have been criticized for lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and even outright corruption. And worse, numerous studies have shown that typically they do not increase growth over what would normally occur, and they can even be actively harmful to local economies. Here in Oklahoma, the people of Norman got so fed up with their UNP TIF district that at first they fired CEDL, the law firm Bethany is using, and later ended the TIF altogether. Springer School District and Meridian Technology Center learned firsthand how damaging a TIF can be to education budgets. Voters in Chickasha and Stillwater were angry enough to petition to put the question on the ballot after their city councils tried to enact TIFs. Organizations such as Americans for Prosperity, the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy, strong towns, the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, and Oklahoma's own 1889 Institute are highly critical of TIFs. California, the state where this idea was conceived, has had so many problems that they've banned them. But haven't TIFs worked great for Oklahoma City? You may recall that the former mayor of Oklahoma City ran for governor last year, and during his campaign claimed to have created over 100,000 jobs in the metro area. But it was not mentioned that the population increased by over 500,000. That's one job for every 5 new residents. It's also never brought up that Oklahoma City's average income adjusted for inflation fell by 11%. You might want to know that during all that time, despite population growth, there was no increase in the number of patrol officers of the Oklahoma City Police Department until last year when new taxes were raised. It may also interest you to learn that Oklahoma City now has staff attorneys handling their TIFs instead of the law firm that Bethany is paying. During their prosecution of the case for the TIF, the Center for Economic Development Law never mentioned any of these problems. Their entire business model is to promote tax increment financing schemes. For CEDL, the TIF does equal prosperity, at least for them. Let me put it to you this way. If you talk to a divorce lawyer, he isn't likely to tell you to try to save your marriage. You go talk to a bankruptcy attorney, she probably won't tell you to get a second job and pay your bills. If you go talk to a corporate welfare law firm, you shouldn't expect them to say anything negative about their corporate welfare program. I encourage this council not to be guilty of rushing into a massive 25-year commitment based solely on the promise of a law firm that will get paid a lot more money by this city if the TIF is enacted, regardless of if it works or not.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? You had given up your time. Three people gave up their...
They gave up 6 minutes for 1 minute? Really?
They gave up 3 minutes a person. That's 9 minutes.
I got it.
You didn't talk for 9 minutes.
I have no problem with letting the public speak, but they're not running this council meeting.
Tell me. The comments at the end of the meeting actually says 3 minutes. Underneath the agenda, under the public hearing items, we actually don't have a time restriction.
Yeah, read that. So not this part and not this.
He's arguing the 3 minutes.
Well, let's see if everybody can get what they have said within the 3-minute limitation, because I think you can modify it depending on the number of speakers.
Right.
Let's see if everybody can get their.
Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, you're still talking, so I just want to make sure you guys actually listen to what she has to say. I am a current Bethany resident and homeowner, and I personally am against this TIF as well. I'm going to read her comments. She says, I have great concerns about what is happening at City Hall. Nothing adds up. The amount of turnover alone raises red flags. Did you know we have had 8 city managers in less than 3 years? I'm starting to ask myself what is going on around here. We clearly don't have our affairs in order, and we are making the biggest financial decision in Bethany's history with an experimental tax district. A risk with over $100 million on the line. We have a budget under $20 million, and we're floating in the red. Ask yourself this before you vote tonight. Does Bethany have the money to risk our financial future? Now, I'd like to know why this proposal has been rushed. Less than a month from releasing the plan publicly to a vote. That's not right. If this proposal is so great for the city, then why is there no mention of this on social media? What about the utility newsletter that goes to every household in Bethany? We need to do a better job informing the public about the biggest financial decision in Bethany's history. I have questions, and I would love to have those answers. We need to pump the brakes and ask ourselves what is going on here in City Hall. We need to get the city's affairs in order before we even consider taking on such a risk. We are playing a dangerous game here with the future of Bethany. Tonight, I am encouraging the council to table this vote to give citizens time to be educated and have their questions answered. Now, I'd also have some few questions. I wonder what other methods have been pursued in the past year to generate revenue or development. You guys have talked a lot about how you've been looking at this for a year, but I haven't heard anything about what else you guys have been doing. Also, are there any developers already lined up? Why go through with this and you don't even have anyone ready to move in? And if you do, who? I think that would be important to know.
Is there anyone else?
Not spelled like that.
Is
Hi, my name's Will Gable. I've been a citizen here for about 20 years. And I'm pretty much don't know a lot about TIF. We haven't really been informed on it. And I think over the years, Sharon and I have tried to get the ad valorem tax in place to get that voted for so that Bethany and all the cities in Oklahoma could have more money per city. So we're kind of concerned that this hasn't been brought up where you can bring in millions of dollars potentially every year to enhance our budgets for every city, not just here. So basically I'm against TIF, and I can't say that I know a lot about it, but I think it's being rushed if it's being voted for in this session. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hello, my name is Janice Miller. I live on 31st Street here in Bethany. I am 66 years old, and I was born and raised here in Bethany. And I am neither for nor against this TIF right now because I just don't know enough about it. And that's my concern. I don't know enough about this TIF, and I don't feel like I have enough specificity about what these gateway projects are actually trying to accomplish. And so that is my concern. It might be a great idea, but I have some doubts about it. I'm all for trying to help Bethany, but I'm not really sure this is the best way to do it. And like the others who've spoken, I think this is being done too quickly. I think the residents of the city of Bethany deserve to know more specifics about what this is going to cost the city in order to provide this phantom income that I keep hearing about. It's bound to cost us something. So that's just pretty much what I want to say. I think we need to slow down a little bit and take a look and figure out exactly where we're going with this and what it will cost us if it does not work. And that's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Sharon Quinn. I think we're hearing a lot of people who are the actual residents who are saying, let's slow it down. We are the people that you're serving, and we need to know if we want it, not just whether or not there's a few people up here who say, yeah, you guys don't know enough, and we're going to make all the decisions for you. I think we're pretty smart, and I think it's really important because you're serving us to get us on board and make sure we like it. I live right off a council where a lot of this is going to impact my home. And I want to know a lot more about it before that property gets locked up. I'm not fond of it going to more private people either. I think the more we can keep things within our own control for the public, that's always in Bethany's best interest. I love Bethany, and I want Bethany to thrive, but I'm not wanting to rush to judgment on something that is already got a lot of people wondering, what are we walking into? It could be very dangerous. It doesn't sound real promising to me. I'm scared. And I think there's a legitimate reason to be scared, and I don't think the citizens should be afraid of what you guys are voting on. I really don't think that should be the case. So please, consider, bring us into the fold and into this talk before you act on it, so we can all love Bethany and be unafraid, and make sure it's all in our best interest, serving us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Before I ask Hank to get up and speak on this, and Jeff as well, so maybe they can answer some of these questions or your concerns or fears, I will say that what we're voting on tonight is merely the boundaries, the TIF boundaries, where these TIF developments would be able to go into. It is to move the city forward so that developers will be interested in the city of Bethany, where they have run away in the opposite direction for 20 years, for whatever reason. These boundaries do not guarantee that a TIF development will ever happen within those boundaries. Do we have a developer? Yes, we do, on 2 particular pieces of property that he has under contract. That one has not been utilized in 40 or 50 years. The other one has not been utilized, to my knowledge, ever outside of a particular family who owns the land. And so I would like to clarify that these are about the boundaries, the 23rd Street boundary and the 39th Street or Route 66 boundaries. As far as past attempts, I would ask Hank to touch on that, because there have been many past attempts for the city of Bethany trying to create economic development. That has not worked. As far as the ad valorem, I am all for all the municipalities in the state of Oklahoma, or the state of Oklahoma, to get on board with 49 other states of what's going on. However, that's not a decision this council gets to vote on, and so that's at a different level than we are right here. We got to deal with things as we have the authority to deal with them. And we all, at least on this horseshoe, are Bethany residents and also care about the city of Bethany. And so just wanted to make that very, very clear.
Mayor?
And I do not think that I'm smarter than anyone else in this room by a long shot. So Hank, would you?
Good evening. My name's Hank Moore, and I serve as Economic Development Director for the City of Bethany.
Microphone, please.
He has it on. You just got to get it turned on.
Is that on now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I welcome the opportunity that this meeting accomplished what it's intended to accomplish, and that's to get public involvement. I mean, there's nothing more than necessary than the transparency. Tonight's resolution is only to identify the boundaries of where a TIF could occur. It is not promising anything. It's not costing us anything to identify what would be developable or that's underdeveloped, or something that's been so stagnant for 25, 30, 35 years. We have Pat Lewis in the audience from OG&E. 1995, the city of Bethany did a commercial analysis of what they needed to do. 3/4 of the properties in 1995 are still undeveloped. That's 25 years later, waiting for someone to come to our community, invest in our community, and be a partner in this community, and it has not happened. In fact, we've had 2 large occupant of buildings leave, the AT&T building on 23rd and the professional tower of Western Oaks, 6-story building that has asbestos, had tremendous roof issues. But because we're looking at doing a TIF, we had a credit union come in and buy that building. A credit union can't make profits, so they're going to invest more in the building than someone else would do to buy the building and make it worthy. Make it work for us, bring 200 or 300 jobs here. No, it's not a primary goal, but 200 and 300 people every day needing to go to lunch, go to a restaurant, stop at the store and get something on the way home. That's how you generate sales tax. In the city of Bethany, we generate about $4.8 million in sales tax revenues. We're not like Norman. Our fire department alone costs more than that. To give you an idea what we're up against. Our budget's about $12 million. Most of it's on the utility side of things. That 4.8 doesn't cover the police department. The 2 primary public safety departments are not funded enough just from sales taxes. So the generation of sales tax revenues is a major driver. You get that from customers coming here for tourism, coming here for jobs, or living here. I took a look at the past 5 years. We've had 32 homes built in 5 years. 32 homes. And people say we don't need any housing. I say we do. Go on Zillow, we got 12 houses for sale within the city limits of 5 square miles. There's not a lot of available housing in this community. And rents are generally high for the conditions of some of these houses. So there needs to be a new influx of housing coming in. And how are we going to do that? Bethany doesn't have the demographics of income to bring people to buy these houses. So we got to bring a reason for them to look at us. And part of that is incentivizing. The credit union specifically came and looked at that building because they knew we were looking at TIFs as a way to help overcome the asbestos, overcome the archaic design being non-ADA compliant, and basically an obsolete building. The choice was to tear it down or somehow incentivize them to come in. That's what the TIF does. The TIF takes the money that they pay in ad valorem taxes, they pay it to the county gives it back to us, and then we give it back to the building owners. So it's a pass-through situation. It affects no one else. That property didn't generate that much in property taxes. It was owned by Southwestern Christian University. It was donated to them, so they didn't even have a cost factor. That's one example. The other is the AT&T building. We lost a lot of jobs when the technology changed and all those call center jobs left. That building's been vacant for years. The mayor contacted the CEO of AT&T and asked him if we could take that out of the investment banker portfolio and see if we couldn't get a local buyer to believe in that building, and we did. They bought it cheap, no doubt. But the bathroom doors are this big, and the call center had mostly women, so the women's bathrooms are big and the men's are not, and it's non-ADA compliant. But it's a concrete, solid building. I tell you, 55,000 square feet on 2 acres of a paved parking lot is valuable real estate. And for it to sit vacant hurts Bethany. It gives the image that we can't accomplish anything because you got vacant buildings all over. So that's one of the areas that I think is way misunderstood about what we can accomplish. The other is that what goes on in Norman is on I-35, and I'm glad I wore an orange tie tonight, just so we can have that in-state rivalry going on. I don't dismiss the need for transparency. I don't dismiss the need for financial accountability. There's no inside deals going on other than driving to make things happen. We had a developer approach us and begin discussions, but nothing's gone on. We're still in the negotiations and seeing what the community wants. And part of that is happening tonight. 39th Street is different than 23rd Street. That's mostly commercial out there that's underdeveloped. Like the property on the north side of the gateway, we call it. It has 3 huge drainage issues that have to be looked at. It has long-standing problems with its accessibility. Those will all be taken into account. We're not throwing money into that. The developer will be putting the money into that. We'll be repaying that improvement. But right now, it's not doing anything. For 50 years, it's just collecting mosquitoes out there. And so it's a blighted situation. It's exactly what the legislature chose TIFs to do. A blighted, underdeveloped piece of commercial real estate. It is the second largest parcel next to a parcel that's owned by Gilbert Carlson. That too has been vacant for years, decades actually. And we hope to get that developed. It hasn't happened. It just has not happened. So we've got to find the economic development tools that work as a template. And yes, it's complicated. And yes, it's scary because there's a lot of unknowns. I left my business card up there, and I will spend whatever time anyone wants to know anything about the TIF or the progress of what we're doing because I believe in transparency. I was on the City of Stillwater Council when we did the very first TIF, which brought in Lake Point, which was a shopping center on North Perkins Road. And it was a huge economic factor. But they had to build in the cost of widening Perkins Road as a state highway. They had to pay for the electrical infrastructure, the substations to be brought in. They had to pony all that money up. The city did not do any of that infrastructure expense, but they were repaid back through the TIF. And one of the publications that was sent around talks about the Olive Garden getting the TIF in Stillwater and how it forced another Italian restaurant to close, and that must be the reason. No, the reason was the food was not that good. There is another Italian restaurant within 100 yards of the Olive Garden that is still open. It's privately owned, and it's good. It's not one against the other. Fortunately for Bethany, we don't have a lot of anything. We have some small eateries. We don't have really a national chain here. We don't have a lot of things here. But we're not saying what has to come here. We just want to create the opportunities. If another donut shop wants to come here, fine, let it be another donut shop. If Aspen Coffee wants to come here, fine, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, whatever. We're not trying to tell what needs to come in. We're just saying we're open for business and we need to act that way. Another part of it is internal struggles. The city of Bethany right now is going through what we call a Title 15 review. And that's looking at our building codes, looking at what we require developers and trying to get them up to current standards. We got ordinances that don't make sense, but we also have ordinances that hurt us. And so we are doing that inside. BETA, Bethany Economic Development Authority, we also created grants for our businesses across the community to improve their signs, to improve their facades, improve their landscaping, improve their parking lots, and the city will help pay for that. They pay for it up front with prior approval of what's going to happen. BETA will reimburse them up to 50% to certain caps. So we are already beginning to do things for small business owners here. The other thing is that we had another TIF here in 2014, 15, 16, somewhere in there, that didn't work. And it was done by a different law firm. And it was flawed. We couldn't use it. We couldn't transfer it to another developer. We had to start over. And that's part of why the 39th Street has a larger TIF approach to it, is because that first TIF didn't materialize because it was driven by project only, by a specific developer, and it just didn't happen. The TIF boundaries we've done this time gives us opportunities over a broad spectrum of property that we can do specific projects, and if they don't work out, the template will allow us to put somebody else in there. It's a backstop. It's a backstop because we need that second chance for developers who may be overambitious, underfunded, and have too big of a grandiose idea of what might happen. But we don't want to discourage creative approaches to things. We want to embrace that, but we have a reality check. We will get the chance as a council and as the BETA, which is the Bethany Economic Development Authority, they'll get a chance to review every developer proposal in any of the TIFs, and will be a public meeting. It will also come before the council as a public meeting for public comment. It will be very transparent. So the 7 things or 9 things that Dr. Rogers talked about, they're all valid. Democracy is messy. It's not clean cut. We have to respect your opinions and your fears and your insecurities and wonder what the heck's going on. But I can assure you the city is not in a position that we're giving away $112 million. Of the city of our size, we're on the bottom of generating sales tax revenues. For cities of our size, 20,000 people, we generate about $400,000 a month in sales taxes. Most cities our size generate $1 million. El Reno does $2 million a month. We've got a crisis here as far as generating sales tax revenues. And this is outside the box thinking. And no, it's not perfect. And you can demand perfection. Perfection has gotten us nowhere. It's because we can't solve everything by being perfectly on target, goals accomplished without mistakes. We learn from the mistakes and we move forward. The council has done a good job of understanding that sales taxes is 4.8, utilities is 7 million. Utility pays for 1.5 times what sales tax is. So if we can release that burden. I'm 100% in favor of any legislature that will take the ad valorem component and give the millage to the cities and municipalities to help fund it, particularly to fund public safety issues, because they are far and apart the most demanded service and the most expensive with the fire trucks, police cars, and all the training. The Oklahoma Academy's already brought that up, and they are doing a think tank on that process right now. So again, I welcome the opportunity to be here before you tonight. I believe in the TIF. I experienced what the TIF can do in Stillwater. I saw where it failed, and I've helped guide this effort with a realistic expectation. And yes, everyone can point to a failure, one or another. I had business failures, they've had failures, council's had failures. But we can't be hung up on the failures. We have to move forward and be a team and be optimistic.
Thank you. Do you have anything you want to add? Does anyone have any questions?
I would like for Jeff to explain. I think your firm had some dealings that were brought up tonight in Norman. Can you explain those?
Our firm represented the city of Norman in economic development.
Your mic is not to your mouth, or he needs to be turned up, one or the other.
Our firm represented the city of Norman going back to at least 2000. We first did the small TIF district that and business improvement district that reinvigorated the Campus Corner area. It was a small, relatively small budget. I think the budget was under $2 million. This was before my time with the firm. That basically redid all the street paving around Campus Corner area. That was paid off within 10 years. We did serve as the city's council for the University North Park project. I did not personally work on that project. My partner Emily did. And that project did run into some issues within the last 2 years or so. But that's not really something I can speak to personally. We've done TIF districts all over the state. So one of the commenters had mentioned that this is our lifeblood, and that is true in one sense, but this is not our only area of practice. We also do various forms of HUD financing, CDBG, affordable housing, tax credit developments. We don't do the actual public financing, but we help GeoBond public finance groups. We serve as urban renewal authority attorneys for several urban renewal authorities across the state. So, I mean, our firm mission is to help communities realize their economic development objectives by whatever means that takes. And unfortunately, in Oklahoma, one of the only forms of local control that they're given is TIF districts.
Your experience or your firm's experience in TIF districting in smaller cities. The comment had been brought up about, I've heard all kinds of comments, but if we bring in businesses that, I mean, let me back up just a minute. Realistically, is Bethany to dream about a big box store, like a Target or a Kohl's or a Walmart or something like that? Or are we going to be in the median size of retailers coming into our city? Now, I'm putting that out, and I'm not asking to say, okay, this company's going to come in here and build, because we don't know that. And I realize that this is just one tool that's available to us as a city, not the only tool. So I think the question has come before is, are we being reasonable in our thought process of what we can dream for and accomplish? You know, we're not going to get a big jet in Bethany coming in this airport, but we will get jets.
Is this a question, Mrs. Larson?
I'm asking the question. So if you can answer that, do you know if we have a reasonable expectation to expect big box stores, or should we be expecting smaller stores?
I would expect smaller stores, but they could still be regional smaller stores. However, anything is technically, I guess, possible. It's an optimistic, realistic expectation. The project cost budget in both the TIF project plans were created based on a individual tax parcel analysis, looking at each parcel, what's currently there, what state that is in, and what its potential redevelopment value would be if it was redeveloped or rehabilitated. And that's based on a lot of comps within a 2 to 5 mile radius of both TIF districts.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else on council have a question?
Yes, I was just going to see if Mr. Moore could address one of the things I've noticed on several threads of people saying that everything will be either 25 years or 30 years in terms of the specific projects within the district. And if you could speak to, at least my understanding that each development can have its own terms within each development within the specific boundaries.
The TIF district as a whole can only last, each TIF district can only last 25 years. So if a project doesn't come along for 10 years, it only has 15 years of increment that it could potentially recoup or have reimbursement drawn from it.
I think another component of that is that each project will be evaluated on its own. Each project may not go out 25 years. A smaller business, it may be only going out 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. So that's the beauty of it, is we can tailor it made for what is needing to happen. The tower building, that's a renovation expense. They're going to bring the jobs. So the TIF will come in and help them renovate, maybe offset the cost of the asbestos removal. I think the roof, replacing the roof, taking the antennas off the roof is a cost of about $400,000 that would not have allowed that sale to occur. So this is a way they can expend it, they can get it back, and we get a better product within our community as far as a 6-story office building that's fully occupied.
If I can add to that too, one of the things that we've been pretty upfront about, starting with the review committee process and at the first hearing and at the council workshop last week, was that one of the first implementation steps, if this is approved, is to establish and work with the community on a TIF implementation policy guide that would set what the procedures are and who the stakeholders are to determine which public improvements would be funded and what the priority would be. And for direct developer incentives, figure out what structure you as a council and a city are comfortable with, what the eligibility and criteria for eligibility would be, and what the general process is to award any kind of financial assistance to a developer. But then also work on specific projects and grants for small businesses to help retain and promote, your local mom and pop businesses. And again, you want to think about the structure, what the eligibility, what does the city want to see, and what is it willing to provide to make sure that that happens. And this is the first step that we would propose in implementation, working mostly with Hank to help develop it and whatever public process we can work with the Community Development Office on.
Anyone else have any questions? Oh, do you?
Oh, I just also want to say, approving either of the TIF districts tonight, we're not pledging any money. We're not promising that anything is going to happen. I feel we've been pretty upfront that TIF is an empty bucket, and unless you do things that you're comfortable with to make things happen, there won't be any revenues collected by the TIF.
Anyone have any other questions?
Yes, Mayor, I do. I think the citizens have presented a compelling argument tonight, their concern of how this process is being, maybe I'll speak for you, expedited or moving at too quick a pace. I guess I would pose this question to the audience. Hank also gave a very compelling argument as to why this is good for the city. There was a large number of people, at least that I observed initially, that appeared to be opposed to the TIF plan. Has that changed since you've heard from Mr. Moore and the attorney? Have you gotten information that makes you feel better about this?
No. You couldn't ask questions. You couldn't discuss. Just boom, laid before us, and we got to sit there and go, oh, okay.
The prosecution, you have to talk far longer than this, and some type of we should have a chance to
In my experience at our workshop with a few citizens and possibly even tonight, I'm not so sure that people really want an answer to their question. They just want to make a statement. Because if somebody asks, I'm telling you, well, you can clap all you want to. The bottom line is, if you've got if you've got a question, then we're glad to answer the question. But it appears to me that depending on what the answer is, because these are all facts, it's an empty bucket until the council decides on what the TIF development, what we're going to agree to what that particular development's going to be. These are simply boundaries that are saying within these boundaries, TIF can happen. TIF developments can happen within these certain areas. I personally don't understand what the fear is in that. We're simply trying to make forward progress, but there's still no guarantee anything's going to happen. And so that's why I make my statement, because at our workshop there were comments and we tried to answer all of those. There's one thing that has been happening since I've been elected anyway for the past 2 years, is I've been trying to bring about more transparency than I personally saw in the city, whether that's Facebook Live or anything. And so one thing I'm not going to get accused of is trying to sneak or slide something through or do an under-the-table deal or rush something and ram it down somebody's throat. We have been doing this based upon what I believe are the guidelines as far as timing, whether it's the TIF review committee. There's certain timing things that the city has to adhere to, and we've been doing all of that. So am I correct in that? I'm not offended, but well, I'm sorry if it appears that way to you. What bothers me is that when somebody asks a question and we give the answer, or the experts give the answer, you don't like the answer. Fluff? Okay, well, that's your opinion.
May I speak?
That's your. I have no problem with that, but I've said my piece. I know what I believe. Everybody can have their opinion. I have no problem agreeing to disagree. So, moving on to item 4.
Mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, I got a couple comments I would like to make. So, creating these TIF boundaries, I do believe, is the greatest tool we have available for us right now in the city of Bethany. I'm very excited about that. We need the new growth. But we've been told 3 times now that this is only boundaries. It's not only boundaries. It's setting up our maximums, that we're willing to give up 90% of the sales tax for the next 25 years. Those are things that need to be modified. We need housing, but the taxpayer should not pay for it with sales tax dollars. My concern is that if we give District A and B 90% sales tax reimbursement, that people in C will also expect it. The same on 23rd Street. If what we give to one developer, the others are going to want it. I want to see this passed. I truly think that creating these boundaries it has created developers and business people to come look at us because of what we're willing to do, which is a positive thing. We're getting action. I don't think that we are so desperate as a city to get these businesses to come in to give up 90% of our unrestricted sales tax for the next 25 years. These things will naturally happen. Maybe not at the speed we would want it to. The second part is the dollar amounts, the caps that we're giving. For instance, 39th Street corridor, TIF District B, the cap is $15 million, where our previous TIF, he was going to develop that for a budget of $6.1 million, including traffic signals on Route 66. So there is an additional $9 million. Where is that $9 million going? And I get some of that he's going to be able to use to attract businesses and give them some rebates. But $9 million, we can't afford to give that up out of our budget. And I do believe one of the greatest things, Mayor, that you've done is promote our city. The Western Oaks Tower, the 7-Eleven, and just, you made comments before, you've had other developers look at this property. We have action going. Yukon is moving towards us. The natural place to build is these properties. And as far as the ripple effect, we have put so much of 39th Street in this district that, which is great, I'm for that, but we're also allowing that up to 90% sales tax of our unrestricted sales tax for the next 25 years, which can be detrimental to our city. So my hope is that we would make some modifications to this.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes.
As the chairman of the TIF committee, I'd like to clarify and eliminate some confusion that I see, in my opinion, related to the TIF process. Tonight, what we're doing is creating a boundary for a TIF that could occur. A TIF has not occurred in any part of the city at this point in time. And what I want to explain is when Mr. Herron mentioned something about 90% of the sales tax revenue, that is not going, that's not in place. That is not what we're voting on tonight. All we're voting on is a boundary for the area. So therefore, if you would like to come to the city as a developer or a resident or an individual, you have an opportunity to apply for a TIF. You have to go through the statutory process in order to meet those requirements to obtain TIF approval. And it is not only approved by the Bethany Economic Development Authority, but it ultimately is approved by council as a whole. And in the process, the public has a opportunity to question each particular TIF agreement. Please understand, no TIF agreement has been put in place. We do not have a TIF agreement that says that 90% of our sales tax dollars are going to go to anybody. That does not exist. We do not have a TIF agreement that says that our sales tax revenue is going to be tied up in a TIF for 25 years. That does not exist. None of those provisions have been implemented by either the council, and the public has not had an opportunity to discuss those issues. All we're doing tonight is allocating and creating a boundary where somebody can come in, anyone in this room, if they would like to create a TIF, they can apply for that opportunity with the city, and we have a process. Our attorneys have proposed a process to allow anybody to do that, any developer, any resident. If Bethany is open for business, I want to make sure we're crystal clear. When people say that it's going to last for 25 years and we're going to allocate our sales tax funds and we're not going to pay for schools, none of that has happened. All we're doing is setting a boundary so a developer can come in and make a proposal for a TIF. So if and when we have a developer, they come in, we negotiate that agreement. It is open to public comment and debate. It will ultimately have to come before the council. That is the process. That is the transparency. That is required by the statute. So I want to eliminate any confusion where it seems like we're overlapping the process. All we're doing today is allowing developers to get on our website and say that this is an available area for development. If you would like to have a TIF, you can look at these areas and begin the process. That is no guarantee that anyone is going to get a TIF. That is no guarantee that anybody is going to get 90% of the sales tax for a particular piece of property. That is something that will have to be approved by the council, debated by the public when we get to that point. So to say that you're against it, I appreciate the comment and I love the debate. Give me all the debate, give me everything, but just make sure that your comments are directed related to what we're voting on tonight. That is the boundary. We are not voting on a specific TIF agreement.
So could we eliminate section 10, section 11, and section 12, where it says 90% of the city's undedicated sales tax revenues generated within increment A, including sales tax revenues from construction activity?
It might be, Mayor, if I could, it might be useful to let Mr. Saban review this if you could, because as a practical matter, and I've worked with their firm on key TAM litigation, and from a legal perspective, I have a great deal of confidence in the work that they've done. I've worked with them on other TIFs, so and that's not a plug. I mean, that's just as your attorney. I think it's important for you all to know that I do have considerable respect for them. But I do think it might be helpful, Mayor, to let Mr. Saban outline what the resolution, or excuse me, what the ordinances actually say.
To follow up with what Councilmember Palmer said, proving the boundaries and allowing developers to come forward, they don't come forward for a TIF, they come forward with a development within the TIF. And it's that development agreement with the developer that would come back before the council, BDA, and others for approval. And the terms of any assistance negotiated is for negotiation. In addition to setting the boundaries, the TIF sets the upper limits of what you can spend. It does not mandate that you spend all of the increment. In fact, most of the times we advise clients not to give all of the increment to your client, whether that be not for the full 25 years that it may be allotted, or a smaller percentage of what the project generates. And for a couple reasons. One, that gives you more resources available to pay for the public improvements and public infrastructure costs that are also included as a project plan, budget costs. But also, the less you give away, the quicker you can get the money, the property values and sales taxes back on your general fund sales tax rolls. So, I mean, it's the upper limits of what you can spend does not necessitate you providing that upper limit to every developer who comes into the door asking for a project. And that implementation policy that I referenced earlier hopefully would set up ways and amounts that you are comfortable providing, whether that be a reduced term of years or a reduced scope of any kind of assistance.
So could we not lower the upper limit to what the council is comfortable with? Because the upper limit is a part of this.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Bethany needs every tool available to be a viable municipality. We are running in the red. We need to have every tool in our shed available to promote the quality of life in Bethany. If we have this limitation at 90%, that is the top end, but that by no means is what's going to happen on every development agreement. It is an option that the city can implement if they want to do that. That doesn't mean it may happen 1 out of 50 times. It may not happen at all. But the fact is, we are doing this so that we have every available option to increase the quality of life in the city of Bethany. Because the fact is, we're running in the red. And guess who is next door? And guess who is over here? They're waiting for the city of Bethany, the people of Bethany, to come in and find a way to mess this up. The city of Oklahoma City is more than happy to take over Bethany. And that's the issue in my mind. We as a community, the community I love and live in, the community that my kids go to school, the community where my wife works, where I live, where I own my home, I don't want anything adversely to affect my community. And if we can't give our community the tools that it needs to be economically viable, we're going to fail.
Is it not possible, I'm sorry.
Hank, you had something?
One of the things that I want to bring out is that
infrastructure, the 18 million.
You're going to have to use your mic. Use your mic.
I'll get up here. Is it the public improvements and infrastructure? You heard in a meeting this afternoon that we have about $300 million worth of infrastructure needs in the next 10 years. We don't have the ability to borrow that much money. And I'm absolutely sure the property owners of this community are not going to pay for that. Just for the $500,000 water well that we've discussed as a possible infrastructure, $500,000, the city would have to generate $13,400,000 in new sales taxes to pay for a $500,000 water well. And so adding more money to the bucket through sales taxes and ad valorem allows us to be able to address the infrastructure issues. Along 23rd Street, most of the water lines and sewer lines were put in the 50s and 60s. They're approaching 60, 70 years old. We have to make plans to address that, and part of that, the 23rd Street, is to address some of the infrastructure needs there, including streets, street lighting, things like that. But the council is also going to have to face the infrastructure needs, and the TIFs allow us to address some of that by wrapping that expense into the TIF as a public benefit. And we allocate sales tax revenues to offset the cost of the infrastructure. We would be doing that 5 years out of general funds. So this is just a way of being proactive about the needs, generating and using the money that's transparent coming from the sales taxes, and getting city benefits that we will not otherwise have funded properly from the other means within the city operations.
I have a question for Chad.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the 93% a normal figure that you all plug in for small cities, or is that something you plug in for all cities or for higher populated cities? Is it just, where does that figure come from?
For the sales tax formula? For the sales tax increment formula?
Yeah.
It varies by city. It varies by what cities are comfortable with. Mr. Herron is correct that you could lower it if you so chose. If you did that at this point, the review committee would have to go back and look at it to provide the possibility to amend their findings. It usually is around 7/8 of the undedicated sales tax. We don't typically set that, the client does.
I think and this question for the attorney, if we vote on this, we can't bring it back to the council for a period of time, but if we table this so that could be adjusted, could we not bring it back at the next council?
If I can answer that.
Yeah, please do.
The project plan in this ordinance is local legislation. You can come back and amend it at any time. Amendments up to a certain degree of increased geography in the TIF districts or increased budget allocations in the TIF districts would require it to go through the full statutory process again. But as long as you're keeping it under a 5% budget change or 5%, that would be an increase, not a decrease. A decrease doesn't matter. 5% increase in the geography or the project cost budget, you'd have to go through the full process again, including the review committee and the planning commission. But other kinds of amendments, I mean, you can end it early, you can revise its terms, you can go amend these specific ordinances that would adopt the project plan. It's an open legislative question.
What's the damage if we wait till next meeting to vote on this?
If you're going to go, I mean, if you want to make substantial changes to the project plan, it has to go back to the review committee.
That's correct.
So, yeah, that was, I just want to make sure that I had that correct. So, I mean, if you want to change the terms and the provisions, it will have to go back through the process again. Now, he's right. I mean, in other municipalities that I've represented, we've done what I kind of refer to as a minor amendment. And so those within those statutory parameters can be approved by the council. But if it's kind of for lack of a better phrase, a major amendment, it will go back to the review committee. But I do think that, you know, these were the recommendations, and I do think that, is that okay if I keep speaking? I'm sorry. One thing that I do think that is a point worth mentioning is that this project plan was developed in cooperation with the taxing entities. I mean, they all had representatives on this committee, and if memory serves, it was a unanimous.
Yes.
It was a unanimous vote to present the project plan. And that's how the statutory framework was set up. It was contemplated that the review committee, consisting of representatives of the taxing entities, would put together the plan and then submit it for approval to the council. But any revisions, and Mr. Saban, please feel free to correct me, but any revisions will have to go back through the entire process again. So, right?
It would have to go back to the review committee.
Right.
It would not have to go back to the planning commission, and I don't believe it would have to go back through the 2 public hearing process.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, as the chairman of the review committee, this 90%, that is a range. That in this 25 years, that is a maximum. It is a range. It's not a requirement. I'm sorry, can you hear me? It's a range. It is not a requirement. And I want everybody to understand that. That's why we put that in the ordinance to the extent that that may or may not be an option, but it could be, and we could consider it, because ultimately the city council is going to approve whatever that percentage is at any point in time. So by setting this ordinance and setting the boundaries, we have all tools necessary to allow the city council to make a decision on each specific project within the TIF. So to say that it's going to be a hard and fast 90% for every project within a TIF, that's not an accurate statement. And to say that it was going to be a 25-year agreement for a project within a TIF is an inaccurate statement. So, and please understand, if we don't like that, then we can determine if we wanted to change it. But in my opinion, as the chair of the committee, we need every option available to increase the quality of life and use this tool as applicable where it needs to be applied within the community, so that we can remain a viable municipality where we're at and preserve what we have and prosper what we have.
As far as the 90% that keeps being brought up, the 2 pieces of property that are under contract with a developer that have yet to go through the development approval process, if that was the number or the percentage that was used, that was voted on and approved, if you look at those 2 pieces of property, we're getting 0 now. And so, you know, to argue about the 90 as if we're giving something away, as of today, we're getting a big zilch, nothing. And so that seems like improvement in my book. And then if it takes 25 years and then it drops off and the city's getting 100%. If it's paid off early in 10, 15, 20 years, then at that point, we're getting 100%. And so it's forward thinking, and it is trying to make forward progress. And I get and I respect that it's uncomfortable for some people. And then it may be scary for some people, because you get kind of used to what you've always gotten. And even though you want better, you got to do better and do something different, or you're just going to keep sitting in the same spot. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to move forward. I have no problem trying to answer people's questions, but you got to pose a question. And so, and we're trying to answer those, and it is transparent, and it is public, you know, meetings like this. So again, this is just the boundary that we're voting on, and this particular item is just the 39th Street boundary. We haven't even gone to the 23rd Street boundary yet. And so this is what I would like to do. I would like to go around the horseshoe, and in about a minute or less, because we've had plenty of meetings, questions, emails, public workshop, I'd like to, as I call on you, to hear if you're for or against voting on item 4 and what your vote is. And then when we get around, then I will call for a motion. Is it legal? Yes.
Item 4, the charter requires that we read the entire title of the ordinance. Consideration and possible approval of ordinance number 1970, approving and adopting the Northwest 39th Gateway Project Plan pursuant to the Oklahoma Local Development Act, identifying and established 3 new increment districts temporarily identified in the project plan as increment districts A, B, and C, designating and adopting project area and increment district boundaries, deferring the names and the dates for the creation of increment districts A, B, and C, adopting certain findings, authorizing the City of Bethany as the principal public entity to carry out and administer the project plan, establishing a tax apportionment fund, declaring apportioned funds to be special funds of the City of Bethany, authorizing the use of increment revenues for the payment of certain project costs, authorizing the Bethany Development Authority to carry out certain provisions of the project plan, ratifying and confirming the actions, recommendations, and findings of the review committee and the Planning Commission, directing continuing apportionment, providing for the severability, and declaring an emergency. If you want to make a motion, if the mayor wants to make the motion, and then
I do want to make the motion to adopt ordinance number 1970. Do I have a second?
Second.
Would you like to go around individually and take a minute and give your 2 cents as to if you're for or against this? Mrs. Larson?
Well, let's stop short of polling. Let's let everyone comment.
I am for using a TIF district, but I'm not for the criteria that this is in it right now. I think it needs to be fine-tuned.
SR?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My primary concern at this point is, and again, I think the TIF is going to be a very valuable tool for us. The people sitting out here are my boss, and they're telling me that they don't like this, and they need more time. And I don't know that there's urgency that would not require us to give them the time that they can feel like they can make an intelligent decision about this. Again, I wish I knew what everyone out in this audience was thinking and what it would take to change your opinion, possibly, but we don't know what that is. I just feel uncomfortable knowing there's so many people in this audience tonight, that are opposed to this.
John.
Thank you, Mayor. The TIF boundary as a whole is the greatest tool we have, but we must work on the sales tax portion of it. It must be lowered. On any portion of it, we cannot afford as a city to give up to 90% of our unrestricted sales tax, because we get liability with this TIF. We have liabilities that we have to provide: fire protection, police. We will take over streets. We will take over sewer lines. We will take over water lines. So we will have liabilities. That's in particularly District A. So I feel that the sales tax needs to be rethought.
Mr. Palmer.
I think I've, can you hear me? I've told you my position and my comments in the discussion. My concern is that we need every tool to keep this city. We need every tool to allow my neighbors to have an opportunity to live in Bethany, Oklahoma. This is a tool that we can use. Is it the end-all be-all? By no means. But it is one thing we can use in order to increase sales tax revenue so that this city can function and operate in the black. We operate in the red. And that is not a process that will lead to success, and that's why I'm in favor of this ordinance.
Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have lived in the city of Bethany for 50 years now. For 26 of those 50 years, I've been involved in this city government, so that means 50% of the time I've lived here, I've been involved in some way or another. And I hear Mr. Herron's concern, but nobody said we gave up 90%. I would rather, even if we did, I would rather have 10% of something than 0% of anything. 10% of something is better than 0, and right now we have 0. And so I am strongly in favor of, I have not seen any major commercial development in the city of Bethany in the 50 years that I've lived here. And if this is what it takes, then I'm all for it.
Thank you. Sounds like in hearing from the council, at least so far that we've heard from, that everyone's in favor of this tool. It's the metrics within it that are causing some trepidation. I've met with people from several different wards in the city of Bethany that reached out to me with concerns and was very appreciative of that. However, those specific people within my ward that have reached out to me have been unanimously in favor of this. My own personal trepidation was due to the fact of the developments within the boundary, if those were all set at 25 years and 90%. And I have sufficient confidence now in hearing things that each development goes through a process of its own within that, which was my main concern, and I'm in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it stands right now, I'm not in favor for it. I do believe like the vast majority of the public here have like really good, solid concerns, and I really appreciate everyone actually coming out. I do believe we need to do our due diligence and contact our constituency, and I would be for like tabling this to, to go back to the review committee and, be amended, because we were voted for the people by the people. Thank you.
Obviously, it's no secret that I am for this, because I'm for doing whatever we have to do to try to move forward, even if that means making people uncomfortable. I'm okay with that. I try my best to respect everybody I encounter. Right now, we have a motion, we have a second, and it's go time as far as the 39th Street TIF corridor, correct? And so this is your time to vote for the future of our city. Please cast your votes.
The charter requires that a vote of the majority of all the council members shall be required for the final passage of an ordinance. So it would have to be a vote of 5 yeas in order for the ordinance to be adopted. So.
Item 5 is also a public hearing item for the 23rd Street Corridor Project Plan. If there's anybody that wishes to speak on this, you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm Gilbert Carlson, 2601 North Rockwell.
Pull the mic to you, please.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. Gilbert Carlson, 2601 North Rockwell. I've been a long time resident of Bethany. I've been very active in trying to bring businesses to Bethany in the last 24 years. I also happen to be a graduate of the University of Oklahoma. I have a couple of diplomas from that institute. I don't recall ever coming to Bethany to campaign for or against anything while a student there. I would say that we need to be aware that the city of Bethany is in a precarious position as far as survival. War Acres is half our size, half the population, and if you look at the last Tribune, you saw that their sales taxes were 400 and some odd thousand, ours were 300 and some odd thousand. That's a result of the commercial frontage that they have that we do not have. It's not that they're smarter or brighter or any better citizens. We need every tool that we can muster. Cooperation on the council is a tool. Having utilities in place is a tool. Having proper zoning is a tool. And this, the TIF, is one of the biggest toolboxes available to us. I serve on the Bethany Economic Development Authority. Years ago, I was the chair of the Bethany Development Authority when it was citizen-run. I've been on planning and zoning for 20-some years. I served on the Charter Review Committee. I chaired the steering committee for the comprehensive plan. I've devoted hundreds of hours to this city without hope of any personal compensation. Today, I happened to stop at Brahms and was visiting with the widow of the late Phil Shirey. She was talking about the legacy that she hoped Phil had left for the city, and she mentioned that in going through the abstract of their house, she saw in 1905 where that property was owned by my grandparents. I have very deep roots here. I choose not to be involved in the political process, but to serve as a citizen volunteer and advocate. Could I borrow 3 minutes from one of you ladies? Thank you. My point is, I'm not real thrilled with the 90%. I've listened to Leslie talk about it's the undedicated part, so it's actually 75%. I'd like to see that smaller. I know that it's a temptation if somebody's aware of the maximum that they may ask for that. But I would take issue with the but for comment that we heard earlier. I've had property for sale in this area for 30 years, and I will tell you that commercial property is not something that's in demand. It's when a business is ready to move that they will come. If you do not have it shovel ready, it will not happen. We need these tools. We can't continue to wait. Thank you.
Mark Long, 1921 North Glade. Honorable Mayor and council members, I'm here representing the Vision 23 Association. We are a leadership group that was formed in conjunction with the city that is a grassroots effort to encourage the revitalization of Northwest 23rd Street within the city of Bethany. The Vision 23 Association strongly supports the city's efforts in establishing the TIF project plan presented tonight here at the City Council meeting. Our reasons for supporting it are as follows. A TIF district along Northwest 23rd Street will allow the city to have a tool to attract more economic development with an area that has been historically underdeveloped and is virtually unproductive. The TIF plan and the process has been used by city after city as a proactive step rather than a reactive step. This will afford the city to be out in front of potential developers interested in the area, as opposed to allowing developers to come forward and then the city reacting to that. Third, the current taxing jurisdictions, Oklahoma County, Putnam City Schools, the Technology Center, the Metropolitan Library System, have all reviewed the proposed project plan and are in support of the action by the city. We strongly disagree with the misinformation being provided by anonymous groups that have incorrect facts and imply that this will somehow cost the citizens of Bethany more tax dollars. This is not the truth, and only the incremental tax increase in property taxes will be available for the use by the city and future developers. We would beg to ask you the question, how many dollars or how many pennies does the city receive in ad valorem taxes today? And the answer in the state of Oklahoma is nothing, zero. So when you're saying that you're using a TIF material that is going to be able to provide that, this is the way the municipalities have a way of accessing funds that you do not otherwise have to access. We encourage you to vote yes in support of the TIF project plan for the Northwest 23rd Street revitalization. And we as the Vision 23 Association will continue to work for the revitalization of this corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Steve Ellis. I'm one of the professors that came down from Norman. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you not hear this? Usually I'm too loud, so I'll talk in my normal voice. I'm one of the professors that came down from Norman. Part of my concern here is I'm very familiar with the literature on economic development incentives. And I think it's important, and also familiar with the sort of TIF laws. And I think it's important, first of all, to clear up a couple of misconceptions. It's true that there is no apportionment being made this evening that that you're giving money to anyone in particular, but by adopting either of these TIF project plans, you are putting money away. You're guaranteeing that all of the ad valorem funds and 90% of the sales taxes go into a specific fund. So no matter what you decide to give to anybody else, you're definitely taking it out of circulation with the general fund by what you do tonight. So that's point number one. I'm a little surprised that Mr. Sabin didn't step in to make that point. But the second point is more general. It's just a fact that most economic development incentives programs fail. There's a consensus of literature on this. Part of the reason why is because communities really just don't have a lot of levers that they have to influence business location decisions. What matters is the fundamental. If it were the case that there were people beating down Bethany's door in order to come to do things, you would know that already. And it's also the case that you don't really have that much to offer to get people here. It's not a pleasant fact to face, but the fact is that these incentives programs really don't work. Now, when people make projections that they work, you should be very suspicious about that. And what we haven't seen is anybody show their work this evening. So my suggestion to you is postpone all this stuff until someone shows you their work. The Center for Economic Development Law has suggested that they have some calculations that show that you can double your ad valorem tax in this area. That's fine. I think the citizens of Bethany deserve to see this before you decide to segregate off certain amounts of any funds that would be created in a certain kind of area where they can't be used all through town. Because even if this works, you're going to get 10% on the dollar for anybody who comes. And if you think that you can attract them without giving away 90% of the benefit of getting with them, spend some money on infrastructure without doing a TIF. That way you get to keep more of the money. If you're convinced that infrastructure is what people need, then you got to pony up some money for infrastructure. You don't have to give the money away.
Yeah. Actually, on the first TIF, the city owned that property for a while. They invested some money in it. I believe our attorney, David Davis, said it's almost $500,000 and still it's sitting there doing jack squat. So we need all the tools we can get.
Can I give her my 3 minutes also?
I
Sure.
don't know that I was going to talk that long, but we'll see. Okay. Cindy Rogers, OU economics professor, again. I want to tell you that I've been studying sales taxes and how local communities compete with sales taxes in Oklahoma for a long time. I've published lots of papers, and I know how devastating this system is for the small communities. Norman is lucky because we are a retail sales center, we have an agglomeration, and it's a different kettle of fish for Bethany. And I'll also confess that I don't spend much time in Bethany. I've been here a few times. So I'm not an expert on your local community, but I know a lot about TIFs. I know a lot about the Center for Economic Development law, and I know a lot about sales tax TIFs in particular. So I would like to reiterate Councilmember Herron's concerns about putting money into a TIF. I know you're saying, you know, 100% of nothing is nothing, but if you're putting all your growth or a significant portion of your sales tax growth and locking that down into the growth in one area, which is going to be the area that will grow in your community. You can put something somewhere and you can make a TIF increment grow. You can make stuff happen there, absolutely. But the question is, if all your sales tax growth is locked up there, how does it help you pay the rest of the bills that you're not paying now? And I think that's the point that Councilmember Herron was making, and it's an absolutely valid point. Norman had this problem, and our sales tax TIF was 40-60, so the city kept 40%. Now, the mayor said, hey, you're not asking us questions, so I'm going to ask you some questions. So you're doing business with the Center for Economic Development law. They are experts in setting up and administering TIFs and showing people, they've been described as cookie cutter designs. So I would suggest you ask them how accurate their predictions have been for communities of your size and the developments you've done. Look at their predictions before and after. They should have that. They've done lots of them. I've never seen it, but they should. I would also ask them if they looked at negative spillovers when they did property value calculations. So they do comparables, and they say, hey, we look at comparables, and then we're going to estimate the value. But then do they estimate if there's a negative impact? If all your growth is going to happen in these areas that you're going to stimulate and prime, what happens to the rest? You've got to net that out. That also happened in Norman. It happens everywhere, and that's a mistake that people make. How is this just TIF financing different than just straight up doing infrastructure improvements, which are investments in your community? You had a slide up there, had 18 million for infrastructure, and then 60 million for economic development. What if you start with the infrastructure? That helps all the business in your community. You don't need to set up a TIF to do that. You can spend some money on your infrastructure. Why not start small? Pick out one particular project, the project you know, the business you're gonna, the project you're gonna do, how much you're gonna spend, and start from there rather than the big enchilada, one little bit, and then build from that. Then you're also not locking in so much of your tax dollars. And then I just want to read from the project plan. This plan is aspirational. There are many unknowns related to exactly how the project area will develop. This is exactly from the documents I downloaded. When it was looking at the overall financial impacts, under the project plan, all the incremental revenues will be apportioned to the apportionment fund for use by the city, the Bethany Development Authority. Okay, so it's actually indicating that all the incremental revenues will be sequestered for this. And then at the end of this project plan, it said the project will have positive long-term financial benefit for the community, affecting tax jurisdictions and business activities. I don't know how you can get that if you don't know what the plan is and you don't know what you're building and how much you're spending and you haven't done the cost-benefit analysis. You can't make those promises. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you address her infrastructure question?
I actually am just the interim city attorney, but I have worked in a number of other communities, and I would like to speak to the infrastructure issue because I think that that's a very important piece of this. The city of Bethany does not issue general obligation bonds. In fact, in a lot of other communities, school districts, counties, I mean, that's how they raise money for infrastructure. And my recollection is that there's only been one successful general obligation bond here in the city, and that was for the library. But I mean, the infrastructure definitely needs to be addressed, but I don't know that it's going to be able to be addressed without a general obligation bond or a TIF. And with the GO bonds, you're going to have a majority vote of the people. So that, I think that that's a really important point. I mean, you've got a lot of crumbling infrastructure around here, and until the council, and the voters, take steps to repair it. There was one question the gentleman up here on the end asked about operational money for ad valorem. There is a little known provision that actually provides that I believe 10 mills are set aside for operational purposes between the county and the city, but I believe it has to be approved by the excise board. So there is actually ad valorem operational money out there for cities, but they have no ability to access that without the approval of the excise board. So, I mean, cities have tried for years to tap into that more stable source of revenues. But so thank you for giving me an opportunity, because I do think this is kind of an educational moment for the community. So thank you.
Hi, Paige Porter, 7405 Northwest 21st Street. I am part of the Vision 23 board. I also work at the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber. Those are my official duties. I want to address myself as a citizen tonight. Earlier, I believe it's Professor Ellis, said no one had presented their work. I'm here to present my work. I'm a product of Bethany. I was born here, raised here, left the community, and moved to Los Angeles, California for 25 years. And on my return in 2016, I found the community that I loved in not the same condition, but in worse condition than when I left. Having now the opportunity to work with the Chamber, covering 5 municipalities, War Acres, Nichols Hills, The Village, Northwest Oklahoma City, and Bethany, I see a lot of economic development opportunities missed. I see a lot that are taken advantage of. But in Bethany, our product is our people. We don't have anything else because we drive by our businesses every day to go someplace else for food, for clothes. I've had the opportunity now, being part of Vision 23 and the Chamber, to go to businesses and learn about them. I didn't recognize myself, being a proud product of Bethany, that I was not doing what Bethany needed. I don't know what we need to do tonight if you pass this for 23rd Street. I can tell you that the Vision 23 board is a grassroots effort. I want transparency. I need this energy that's here to filter through us and come to us, and we need to know more. But we can do that because we have an organization like Vision 23. We need to work in conjunction with the city. There's no doubt that we want more information, but there is no doubt that if we don't do something now, we will have another 20 years where nothing goes by. And since I came home in 2016, 7-Eleven has moved. The tower, which I was told was on the verge of being torn down, is now not going to be torn down, but is going to be revitalized. I think that is because we are pushing, and it may be fast, but if we can all work as citizens to filter, get our ideas together through Vision 23 and work with the city, because we have that agreement. We're not working for the city, we're working with them. We want the same information you want. And I think that we can do that. But we have to pass this tonight, or we're stuck in a cycle. And I don't think that we're doing anything irrevocable if you pass it. I think it's boundaries, and I think that there's an amendment process
Is that correct? If they pass it tonight, there is an amendment process for up to 5%? So I know now I have to borrow time. Thank you. I don't see the harm in passing this for boundaries. I've been at every workshop and every hearing that we've had, and I've met with as many people as I can to educate myself about the TIF. I know it's scary, but I know things are happening now and they're moving. And people are excited about that movement. We're also scared, but we're excited because something's changing, and we need to keep moving with that. And I think Vision 23, along with the city, we can make a difference and do this the right way. We can do it where it's not scary for us, but we have to get going and doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
You're first, you're a lady.
I'm afraid of the unknowns. I'm afraid of the fact that we're saying we'll let you ask questions and then we don't open the floor for our questions. Talk and not being followed through. I'm worried that we're saying this is our only solution when I know there's a much bigger solution that nobody is really talking about. I also live right off of that 23rd area. And I want to know what happens when these boundaries are set. Are they locked in? Can anybody come in? Or now is it a very strong limit of who can and how they can and what businesses may or may not be able to move in? For example, if a school wanted to come into the area, can they go there? Can they not? What kind of new mountain might they have to climb that they might not climb if we didn't do these boundaries and things? There's a lot of questions that I truly legitimately have that I'm not prepared to ask because so much I don't understand a lot of what you're talking about because it hasn't been totally, I hear the word transparent, but I'm not hearing it all out on the table. I'm hearing a lot of talk saying, well, you know, we need, you know, Bethany's not improving. Hey, I've been living here for 20 years. I know our problems and issues. But I also know we could get the state law changed. That's another tool bigger than TIF will ever be, and get all of our money back. And it won't be bound up. I'm afraid of these figures like John Herron is bringing up. We don't need to leave on the table the biggest possibility as a temptation under desperation that we might go to. We can put safer limits that say it's safer to just put this in and we can't put ourselves into some of these very scary positions. That's wise. I'd like to just see more wisdom, more discussion, and I do think we need more citizen involvement in this discussion. I'm going to live right within a walking distance of some of these boundaries. I want to know what that's going to mean to me in my home. And I haven't heard anybody saying anything about that. I really haven't. And I really think we need to be able to ask these smart questions and get the answers and not be forced tonight to try to pull them out of our hat. I hear things. I trust my inner spirit. I trust the work I've been doing in Bethany, wanting to bring Bethany into a revitalized position. And I know there's another way to get our sales tax back. And I think Bethany's greatest gift is not in commercialization. We don't live in the right location. Yeah, we're close to War Acres, but they're still further out. We're deeper in. So what is our gift? Let's build that gift up. And I'm not sure commercialization is the way we can bring the greatest money in. But if we build up our beauty, we build up our attractiveness to be a place to come, because there's nothing like it. It's so echo green. It's got trees. It's got unique stuff. It's kind of like Pleasantville. We could do that. And we'd have to build up our infrastructure. I'm all for it. Of course I'm for it. But I'm not sure commercialization is really ever going to be our answer. Like you said, we drive by all the places. The businesses aren't getting enough money to want to put the money in to make it the best grocery store in town. Okay? So I think we really need to be realistic about where we are on the outskirts and that we have something else. And I'm not hearing anybody talk about that as one of our tools. I think it needs to be part of the conversation before we literally sink in our feet and say, this is our only answer, it's our only tool. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. And I'm not hearing this stuff and getting all the questions I'd like to really get out and know so you could convince me if that's really the fact. I thank you. I think my requests are reasonable. And I think giving us all some time would be show great respect for the citizens. And like somebody else said, I don't think we're going to die tomorrow if we wait another month. Our situation has been what our situation's been. And I really do care. I'm not really trying to be adversarial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Sir, my name is Art Palmer. I live on College Avenue. I've been here in Bethany for about 18 months. I left Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, to come here to be next to my family. I take a granddaughter, pick her up at school every afternoon, and Granddad, can I have a milkshake? And we go to Brahms in Bethany because we need the business. I regret this discussion that the council is split on this issue, that this is, you talk a lot about the toolkit. Well, this is part of the toolkit. And I don't know what's going on with our folks from Norman. Do we have a lobby group that invited you?
This is our research area.
Sir?
This is our research area.
Your research area. Well, Norman has OU. They're on national television. This is Bethany. We're on Route 66. And I think comparing Norman and Bethany is not too conclusive, apples and oranges. So I'm a little over 80, and I yield to these guys. Paul, you've been here 50 years. And sir, we talk about leaves and all that, but I respect their opinion. And they're agreeing that this is a tool that's going to help the city. And Lord knows what happened to us. So do we get annexed by Oklahoma City? The drainage on my street's not good. I like the new trash cans. Things are moving along. But I think you need to do this. And I'm disappointed that the council is split on this. There ought to be some kind of meeting of the minds. I notice one member is absent. So do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Chris Powell, Bethany resident. One of the things that I think stands out to me about this council, and I've been in Bethany for 20 years and seen a lot, is that there is really some energy on this council to do some things. Mayor Westmoreland is as pumped up and energetic as anybody I've ever seen up here. And I don't think there's anybody in this audience that wants anything but the best for Bethany. And the mayor has been as much of a cheerleader as he could possibly be. I helped Steve when he ran because I felt like he was a better choice than the other person on the ballot. And I was pleased to see Matt win in his recent election because I thought of those candidates, even though I no longer lived in that ward, that he was the best person of those choices. So I don't think that anybody should think that because we might disagree on how to go forward that anybody wants anything than the less thing for Bethany. But I want to tell you why I am opposed to TIFs. And it has to do with the fact that when you take this ad valorem money that goes into these TIFs, some of it comes from our public schools. It's ad valorem money that is earmarked for our public schools that then gets diverted to the TIF. Now that money gets made up to a certain degree by the state equalization fund, which is supposed to ensure that every school district has a certain amount of money per student to run our public schools. But that reduces the overall amount in the state equalization fund. So essentially, every TIF district in the state, and Oklahoma City's got 13 of them, every TIF district in the state is being subsidized by every taxpayer in the state through the ad valorem, and it's reducing the overall education budget in the state of Oklahoma. It's a problem, and it's a problem that we have to fix. Another problem that we have, and you've touched on it, is the fact that our municipalities can only use sales tax for revenue. That's their only revenue stream. I understand your point. I understand you're sitting up there looking at it from the perspective of Bethany only. But these TIF districts are harming education across the state. And that's why I personally will never be in favor of one. We have too much energy. We have too much ability on this council. We have too much going for us in Bethany to have to resort to that when it's part of a process that is not just Bethany, and Bethany hasn't done it at all yet. It's part of a process that's harming education. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that our TIF had held 10% specifically to go to the PC schools to address that very thing. So we would not go ahead. Oh, the one we, okay.
9th Street project plan.
He said that TIF A on 39th Street Gateway, we held 10% of the ad valorem tax back specifically so we could give it to Putnam City Schools because we don't want, because we see what you're saying and we refuse to do that.
So it sounds like that only Putnam City Schools are going to be affected and not Bethany schools. I'm a school teacher. I don't work at Putnam City Schools. I actually work in Oklahoma City. And I'm against this. I'm against any juggling of any school funds whatsoever.
Bethany schools were not affected just because the TIF development has to reside within the school district.
I understand that, but you chose them, right?
Excuse me?
But you guys chose the development, and so you chose areas that would only affect Putnam City Schools, correct?
No. As far as the development,
The
developer chose that location.
Oh, so you guys didn't choose the TIF boundaries?
The fact that it fell completely within the Putnam City School District was coincidence.
So Bethany schools would not be affected, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Because you're very limited of where you could put a TIF in the Bethany School District.
Oh, really?
And the PC representative on the TIF committee voted for this TIF.
Does that person reside in Bethany District?
The PC school representative.
I understand, but do they reside in Bethany? I'm just curious.
I have no idea, because they have, you want to explain how the TIF, do you understand? I don't think she understands.
The resolution of intent to where they were saying that they were going to consider a TIF district. They sent out a letter and placed some phone calls with each of the affected taxing jurisdictions, asking them to designate someone who could speak for them to serve on the review committee. And I believe Putnam City Schools selected their chief operations officer. I don't recall her name. Yes.
Yes, I do believe Mr. Bowles does live in Bethany. Is there anyone else? Does anybody need to speak on the 23rd Street specifically, or do we move on to item 6? Somebody answer her question if you can.
There are no additional restrictions being imposed on the property by the TIF.
Not additional, any whatsoever, anybody can go in there and buy anything, or they're cut down and locked in for commercial purposes?
That's correct. The only controls that the city would have is its financial powers to provide any assistance to anything.
But as far as zoning will restrict what it can be done in the corridor. I mean, like anything else, it would go through a zoning and planning review and whatnot. So that would be the parameters that it's not unlike. Being within the boundaries just allows them to be a candidate, if you will, to being looked at for TIF financing. and then we would have to look at what they might need versus what they're asking for and come up with an agreement. It may not be a developer, it may be the property owner, like in the AT&T building or the tower building. They're not developers, they're the property owners. Mr. Carlson could come and ask for something to develop out his property as a property owner. So this is a little bit different. The other is that this is a residential component to this because of the neighborhoods. So the idea is we want some input from the neighborhoods, and we'll get that through the Vision 23rd people is rallying those neighborhoods together to find out what they want to see. But the TIF does not impose restrictions as in and on itself. It just is inclusive of the boundaries. I'm sorry?
90%.
This has the same sales tax.
Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, just if I may, just very quickly. So this was a doozy of a first meeting to show up to. Moved back here 3 years ago. And by the way, my son said as I left the house, "You're so lucky you get to meet the mayor of Bethany." So I'll have to bring him up here sometime. Anyways, so I'm Ward 2. Oh, Chris Williams, I'm so sorry. 6901 Northwest 36. You can throw a stone at my house. Ward 2, would love to meet you. Alumni, SNU. And as of right now, teetering on the TIF. Don't quite understand everything. But what I do know, Mom went to school down there in 1958. I got there in 1989. She ran her own business, still does, at the age of 80. And anyways, and what I know and what scares me is for big businesses coming in. I work in mental health. I build community. That's what I do. And so what I know is investing in community is investing in people and investing in relationships and less investing in talking to investors and business people. I need you to come by my house. Come talk to me. 20,000 people. I've been here for 3 years. I know my next door neighbors, hardly anybody else. Part of that's my problem. No people down the strip because I do my shopping down 39th Street because I believe in putting my money back there. So if we invest in our people, that's our treasure. That's what I've been hearing our community say. So forget these big yahoos that got all these money that are come in and give us what? You don't work in Bethany? Why not? Because there's no money here. So you're bringing in what? KFC or whatever y'all were saying, Starbucks for minimum wage? That's as good as our people are? No. Invest, buy local, right? That's basically all I had to say. Might have to get your autograph before I go home. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Tell your son I said thank you very much. Is he a voter? I'm just kidding. Sweet. Is there anyone else?
Hi, Jill McCartney with the Chamber, 7440 Northwest 39th. And a couple of Councilperson Larson, you asked about big boxes coming in. The reality is retail across the country, across the world is changing. Big boxes overall are dying left and right. And so it's not about us getting that. It is commercial districts that have revitalized themselves. What we have seen, it happens with small businesses and with investment of people that have vision and such. And this TIF district can create the tool for that type of visioning. But don't necessarily expect that. You ask about the Bethany district and or the Bethany school district and how that was impacted. The reality is the footprint of that district is so small there, and that the businesses in that area are the area is full and it's operating. It doesn't need TIF. The TIF districts were drawn where there is a need for development, and the little 1 square mile that is the Bethany School District just doesn't happen to need that TIF. That's why it was excluded. It's not a conspiracy. But I have a question. If this passes tonight, which I hope it does, this is setting boundaries and it's setting guidelines, but we're not actually, if we vote for this, we're not actually spending any money in doing this tonight. We would still have to go through additional reviews and proposals. And had we voted for the other one, we're not spending any money, we're not giving anything away tonight. Is that correct? That's my question.
I believe that is correct.
Not budgeting any money, we would be setting aside any revenue generated within the TIF district into an apportionment fund to use to pay off the authorized project costs in the project plan.
So, but as we're talking about all of these things and talking about infrastructure, that we need to invest in infrastructure, the beauty of the TIF is it is a tool to attract outside developers to come in and spend their money in our community as part of getting things turned around. And from that, as that starts earning money, they get some of it back. But it's money that we don't have to invent or tax our people to get it going. After it gets going, it costs us at that point, but we will have more when we go forward with that. So it's for the people that are sowing seeds that this is costing us money if we pass this right now, it's not. For the people that are arguing that it is, you know, until it starts earning money, that's when we start, you know, incentivizing it back. And it's got to be a big enough stick that it's going to get people to want to come here and do that. It's got to be a big enough carrot in that regard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Item 6. Would you like to read that?
I will. Consideration of possible approval of ordinance number 1971 approving and adopting the 23rd Street Corridor Project Plan pursuant to the Oklahoma Local Development Act, identifying and establishing a new increment district temporarily identified in the project plan as Increment District A, designating and adopting project area and increment district boundaries, naming Increment District A as Increment District Number 2, City of Bethany, and establishing a date for the creation thereof, adopting certain findings, authorizing the City of Bethany as the principal public entity to carry out and administer the project plan, establishing a tax apportionment fund, declaring apportioned funds to be separate funds of the City of Bethany, authorizing use of increment revenues for the payment of certain project costs, authorizing the Bethany Development Authority to carry out certain provisions of the project plan, ratifying and confirming the actions, recommendations, and findings of the Review Committee and the Planning Commission, directing continuing apportionment, providing for severability, and declaring an emergency.
Do I have a motion to adopt ordinance number 1971?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes.
It passes. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Is it appropriate for me to explain my change in vote in this one?
Yes. If you're in our district, explain yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
This particular one on 23rd Street, the liability to our, well, I am in full agreement with Mr. Herron on that tax is so high and it looks to me to be a bait switch situation. But that said, this is a third of the project on this street, and for years we have neglected 23rd Street as far as protecting them and enforcing them and encouraging them. We have, not to say that 39th isn't important, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have not done as a city our due diligence. And my vote tonight on this particular issue is an encouragement to 23rd Street, and I hope that as it comes before us, that I don't want outsiders expecting that they're going to get that 93% right off the cut. I have a problem with that, I do. But I am full agreement that we need to move forward on 23rd Street. I just felt like I needed to explain that, because I've sat here too long and pushed for something to happen over there, and it hasn't. And I This is only one tool. We need to get the GO bonds. We need to use the other tools that are available to us. This is just, we just got to be very prudent on how we execute this. That's all I have to say.
Item C is the emergency clause. Do I have a motion?
So moved to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Doesn't need to be.
It's just move to approve the emergency clause, and of course,
is there anything pending that we need to do it quickly?
Tower, maybe, I don't know. Is it tower emergency for anything?
Okay.
Do we have a second? Dies with no second.
Which means, just for those of you in the audience, that the emergency clause, basically, that means the ordinance will have to be published in full and that it will not take effect immediately, just so everybody knows.
Item 7 is consideration of possible adoption of resolution number 1542, designating the week of April 14th through April 20th of 2019 as National Telecommunicator Week in the city of Bethany. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'd second that, and given the time frame, I do not want to diminish the adoption of this resolution in any way, to the extent that a National Telecommunicator Week is a recognition that is excellent, and those individuals who do that line of work on behalf of the citizens of Bethany are unsung heroes, and we should support them and appreciate them in any way possible.
And we have one in the audience with us tonight who is our translator. So, I have a motion and a second.
That's my second.
Please cast your votes. Item 8, I have a motion to table this. Would you like to explain?
I will. We were waiting on the conflict waiver from McAfee Taft, and they still had a little bit, so I checked my phone just to make sure we didn't get an email from them. So I would request that this be tabled to the next meeting. I suspect everything will be in order at that time.
I made the motion to table. Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes. And that is tabled specifically to the next council meeting?
Yes, sir.
Item 9 is consideration and possible approval of mayor's appointment of S.R. Hunter to a new Parks Committee that will be formed. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 10, consideration and possible approval of provisions for furnishing property insurance for the new Bethany Library. Do I have a motion, or does anybody have any questions on that? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 11 is presentation, discussion, and possible action on approval of new website vendor.
I wish.
Good evening. I was asked to put together a little bit of research on I'm sorry, I'm Jessica Aycock. I'm the Community Development Associate. And I was asked to put together a little bit of research on website options. We currently have a website that is very outdated, and we regularly get contacted by citizens because they're having trouble locating things that they need to find on our website. As a staff, we have trouble updating it. The content management system, which is the back end of the website, is incredibly hard to understand. It's very counterintuitive. And so there's a lot of live chatting and help desk type stuff that goes on with the company that provides our website to help us get it updated. So that kind of sums up the challenges that we have currently. When I looked into our website, I found out that we are currently paying more than $17,000 annually for hosting. In addition, we pay $100 for a SSL certificate, which essentially puts the S at the end of the HTTP. So I looked up in the contract, what does annual services consist of? And it is our government content management system, which is the support of the back end of the website, any upgrades that they push out as a company, maintenance, support, and hosting. Our current company does provide that we can have a free redesign every 4 years. That is up for redesign this year if we choose to take it. In addition to that, we as a staff would need to pay for additional training to be able to better understand how to work the content management system, so that way we are not taking nearly as long to get updates pushed to the website. That would be an additional $625 for up to 6 staff, and that would be in an online webinar type of environment in our offices. So all of that being said, I looked up some other companies that specialize in government websites that might be a better option for us. The first option would be a company called Revise. They feature websites that they only work with municipalities, and they feature websites that are 100% custom. They have a staff of designers on payroll that we can actually look at their work and choose which designer we like best. None of the sites that they produce are template sites, which means no 2 sites are the same. We can request retraining at any time, and they push out hosting upgrades 4 times per year. Again, they do provide for a redesign in year 4 for no extra cost, and they do have additional features that are available to us that are included in the cost of the contract, such as citizen complaint tracking softwares, notification systems, and so on and so forth. One additional point that I wanted to bring forward about this particular company is that they do have the option for a department microsite, which essentially means that we can build a miniature website for a specific department into the website, our main city website. So for example, Public Works might be a good option with all of the new changes with trash. They would have their own homepage within our website where people could go to the Public Works homepage and they could have all of their information there. The cost to build the website would be just under $15,000, and then year 2 and beyond, that includes the first year's hosting, and that costs the $14,700. The annual cost in year 2 and beyond is $3,900. This would be an annual savings in year 2 of $13,625.40. Here's some, and you guys should have all of these slides so you can go and look up some notable websites that they've done. They do a really beautiful job. I also looked at Back 40 Design Group. They are a local company and local to Oklahoma City. They offer continuous customer service and continuous training. The benefit to this company is that they can come to us and do our training. And they use the industry standard content management system called WordPress. And so any new staff member that comes on that has any experience with websites is going to be able to jump right in and edit the website very easily. Their website build cost is $13,500, and their annual cost is $1,000. The downside to Back 40 Design Group is they don't have any built-in citizen complaint tracking systems. Again, notable websites that they've done if you care to look at it in your spare time. So I just wanted to put a quick little chart up so you guys could kind of compare what it would cost for the website build, which is what is on the left, and then your annual hosting, which is what is on the right. So even with changing companies, the hosting and the build would actually end up being cheaper than what we're paying annually for our current website. So I know we had a couple of council members that were really interested in a citizen complaint tracking software. So I also did a little bit of research about this. Civic Plus, which is the company that we're with currently, has recently rolled out a system that we can just build into the website that we have currently. It features a centralized location where people can text us, send us a Facebook message, they can call us, they can tweet us, and it all goes to one inbox, and then we as a staff can assign that to specific people, and they can interact back and forth within the preferred means of communication to get those complaints resolved. And then we also have the ability to convert complaints to service requests. So if we get a complaint about a pothole, we can make that a service request and send that to the appropriate person, and then the citizen can also follow up on their end on where their complaint is at. In order to implement this to our current site, we would be looking at $3,000 and then an additional $8,000 annually for operating. So our first year we would be looking at another $11,000. Like I mentioned, Revise has a lot of these features already built into their websites. They have a notification center which would allow us to push out emergency notifications on the site as a pop-up message, which would be great for road closures for special events. If there's an area of town that police or fire identify as something that citizens need to stay away from for a short period of time, all of that can be pushed out via the website. eNotify allows citizens to sign up for automatic updates, such as city council meetings or traffic meetings. And then public service request is that citizen complaint tracking software that allows us to receive information from citizens to have potholes repaired or so on and so forth. And that's all included in the cost of the website design and hosting with the company Revise. Since Back 40 Design Group doesn't have anything built into their software, we also looked at a company called C-Click-Fix. This company utilizes not only a website application but also a mobile app that allows citizens to communicate with the city in much the same way as the Civic Plus software does. So I won't go into the specifics about that. It is able to be added to any website platform also. So if we went with Revise and we decided we didn't care for what they had available to us for free, we could add C-Click-Fix later. It runs $13,800 annually. So, assuming that we looked at putting C-Click-Fix within Back 40 so we could have a citizen complaint tracker on any possible website, you can see here your total cost, the two bar graphs on the right that are the tallest. The one on the left is, of those two, is total 2019 cost, and Revise is the blue bar. Back 40 is the yellow bar, and Civic Plus is the green bar. And then total year 2 and beyond is, again, as you can see, it's going to save us a ton of money. So overall, staff would recommend that we change our website company to Revise. It will save us $11,000 this year and nearly $100,000 over the next 5 years.
I would like to say I'm so glad we're getting this presentation, because this is something that multiple people on this horseshoe have been requesting and questioning the expense that we've been spending for astronomical. Well over a year. And so that has been absolutely frustrating.
When I looked into it, I did not believe that number. I was like, this got to be a typo. It's not.
We were shocked as well many months ago.
Mr. Mayor, can I make some comments?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
This is a long time coming. I've had complaints from residents related to online payments. I became aware of the tracking software in talking to the manager for the city of Chickasha. And let me tell you, as a lawyer, the paper trail and your file will save you if and when you have to prove something. And that's what we would have with this tracking system. We'd have a work report. We would have an opportunity to say, we did this on this date at this time, and it was taken care of.
Yes.
And not only that, but it provides an opportunity for the residents to interact with the city staff, and the city staff has an automated protocol which helps them do their job.
That's right.
And that's the thing. We have great employees, but we need to give them the tools to be successful, and they can do that with this new system. And thank you for the comparison related to the amount. I think it just made me sick to think about how much we were paying for the present system and the value that we were not receiving. And one other thing that, thank you for finding these other companies, but I'll cast it out there. If there's a local company who works and has a presence in Bethany, by all means, if you can provide this service, please, when we get to that point, put in your proposal to see if you can do the same, because wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a local company providing this service to the residents in Bethany? And finally, if we can do this, it will help everyone on this horseshoe do their job to the extent that we can immediately respond to the residents. If you have a pothole, if you have a situation that needs to be taken care of, there is a mechanism to allow you to get a better service and quality of life in Bethany. And thank you for presenting this and providing the information. It's just, it's amazing to me. I think I'm looking forward to the time where we will look back on this and say, I can't believe what we did before this.
I have, this is a presentation, discussion, and possible action. So in regards to someone locally, I think that's something they should have already done, because this is an action item. And so.
Could I may ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
The transition from where we are to this, are you confident this is going to be smooth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So what they'll do is they'll build our website on essentially another domain and let us see it. We'll go through approval processes. They'll give us mock-ups. We'll get to mess with it before it goes live, and then it'll just switch.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
May I make a motion?
I've got a comment. I would hope that this new system provides the citizens more information, so when they come to these meetings, they are better educated. They have maybe the information that they need to make the decision, or at least to understand why we make decisions. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make. First of all, before I make the motion, I want to thank Jessica for the wonderful presentation. You did very good. Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to follow staff's recommendation.
And I'll second that.
And I'll third that.
Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
Item 12 is citizens' opportunity to address the council on general topics related to city business or services. There's a 3-minute limit. No action may be taken on matters under this item. Is there anyone that wishes to address the council? Item 13, city attorney's report.
I don't have anything.
Item 14, city manager's report.
I have nothing else to report, but I would like to also thank Jessica and Amanda for the work they put on in this. Good work, ladies.
Item 15 is mayor and council members' announcements, comments, and proposals. This evening, let's start down with Mrs. Sandoval.
I'm going to say mine in Spanish, that's why I'm using an interpreter. So, creo que hoy fue una buena forma de la comunidad representación.
She believes today with a good formation of the community and representation.
Tenemos que seguir comunicándonos con la comunidad e informarlos sobre lo que está pasando en Bethany.
Okay. We need to start communicating with the community more and informing them of what is going on.
As well, y promover transparencia.
And
Promote
transparency.
Todos queremos lo mejor para Bethany.
We all want the best for Bethany.
Y siempre queremos escuchar las opiniones de todos.
And we always want to hear everybody's opinion.
Quiero que todos sepan que tienen la libertad
We want everyone to know they do have a liberty
de venir a compartir sus opiniones y preguntas
to come and voice their opinions
sin ningún tipo de discriminación e intimidación.
without any discrimination or intimidation.
Gracias a todos por venir.
Thank you for everybody coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Just appreciate the amount of energy for tonight, amount of comments and things, and look forward to this kind of engagement on tons of future topics.
Mr. Todd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question regarding item number 10. We passed that for the insurance for the library, and I'm not sure that I understand what we passed. Is this to become effective immediately or become effective when we accept the library as a finished product?
Councilman Todd, that will become effective after we give them a certificate of occupancy. We have notified OMAG, and we have them standing by to do this, but no, it won't become effective until we take possession of the library.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. That's what I anticipated, but I wanted to make sure I knew all that I think I understood. The second item is sometime probably as much as 6 months ago, staff was taking a look at, and Jessica did such a good job, we may want her to look at something else. Back then, they were looking at a service provider. We are currently paying right now $25,000 a year to be able to swipe the credit cards. And to me, I think that's an outrageous thing, and we're going to look at that. Do we know where we are there?
I can answer that also, Councilman Todd. We are looking at another company. Matter of fact, we're in the final stages of doing that. We're going to combine right now we have 3 or 4 providers for those credit cards, and we're going to combine that with one, which will make it more efficient and more cost effective for us. So we're in the process of doing that also.
And I believe that also will, at no expense to anyone, the person that owns the company that accepts the credit card payments will be making a contribution to the SHINE program. So that may be extremely beneficial to the citizens of Bethany.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of house cleaning issues. At some point, we were going to obtain a bid to replace the envelope system for our utility bills. Is that what's the status on that?
I can answer that question as well. Yes, we are talking to another company. I'm blanking. I think is it Triad? I'm blanking on the name of the company, but anyway, we are moving forward with that too, Councilman Palmer. We have sent them, well, we're working to send them a file so they can generate our bills. But yes, we're moving forward with that, and we will obsolete that machine. We were hoping to have it done by the end of this month. I don't think we're going to make it, but it should happen sometime in May. It'll be much more effective, and we're also going to save a considerable amount of money by switching to this service. I don't have the number in front of me, but I'll provide that for the council.
Thank you very much. And a couple other comments. Last city council meeting, I mentioned some kind of task force or committee, search committee for the city manager and city attorney. I think that process is going to begin, and I would encourage council to get behind that and to set up some kind of a system. I think we're getting there, but I would like to encourage the process. I'd also like to point out, if you're a business in Bethany and you would like to apply for the grants that are available, that is a program that is provided, and if you want to change your facade or you want to submit an application for a new sign or something like that, I don't know who has applied for that, but it's an excellent program, and it can make a huge difference not only in your storefront, but the fact is we want to help you be a successful business in Bethany. And that is one program that I hope, if you're a business owner, that you will take advantage of. In regard to the TIF discussion, I think my comments were provided, and the discussion that we had was excellent. I don't necessarily agree with most or some of the discussion, but the fact is, and I want to reiterate this for the record, the TIF is a tool. We need that tool to have new families, new houses, create new markets, and we need every available tool to improve Bethany. And I appreciate the debate and the discussion, and I would hope that it would be ongoing so that we all can live in the greatest city on the face of the earth. to take some words from our mayor. Thank you very much.
Mr. Herron?
Thank you, Mayor. I will also touch on the TIF. I think the TIF is a great tool. I hope we do move forward again on the 39th Street TIF district and possibly even completely eliminate the sales tax aspect from that and move forward and handle sales tax like we've handled in the past, where we do it one-on-one basis with the individual retailers. Thank you.
Sir?
Yes, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight and being a part of the process, and I hope you understand that, and I agree with you, sir, I concur that I'm disappointed that we had a split tonight, but that doesn't mean that this issue is dead. It's just going to be delayed. I still, as Mr. Herron stated, have full confidence in the value of the TIF. I think it will happen. It's just going to be delayed a while. So
you're going to drive on, right, sir?
We'll move on.
Okay. Do it.
Again, thank you for coming out tonight and being a part of the process.
Mrs. Larson?
I also want to thank all that came out tonight, the ones from Norman, the ones from the north side, east side, west side, wherever they came from. I'm grateful that you took your time, your energy, your gas to get here and let us know what you think, because we serve the people of our city and we need tools to make that happen. I also am very grateful to Jessica for her work in saving the city money on our website, and I do want to encourage that the TIF get back on the stick and that we, for 39th Street, and reevaluate and possibly ask questions, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to touch on a few things. One, first and foremost, the highlight of my family's week, and probably will be definitely the highlight of our week, as we have most of it still to go. But we received letters from our boy who is in basics right now, so that was a big deal in our house yesterday, so we're excited about that he's doing well. Also, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. If I offend anybody with my comments, I apologize, but I promise you it won't be the last time, because I tend to do that. I'm a very passionate person. I'm passionate about our citizens and our city, and I want to see forward progress made. I've said from the get-go, the very first time I sat in this seat, that we will probably make mistakes because we're not perfect. But if we make mistakes, I personally want to be making mistakes trying to move forward, not sitting on our rear ends doing nothing. And so that is a mistake I think we have been doing for a number of years. And so, again, I want to try to make forward progress, whether that's TIF or whatever it may be. We have to make forward progress or do whatever we need to do to try to attempt to do that. The last thing I want to do is become another story like Britain, Oklahoma, because we do nothing. There are a lot of people, it was alluded to several different times, there are powers that be that would love to swallow up the city of Bethany and us just become a part of another city. I refuse to do that. We are no one's suburb. We have, I call other cities our suburb. So we're not a suburb. We're our own city. And I will fight for that no matter what. It was said that community is very important, and it's vitally important. The day after I was elected, a code enforcement issue of peeling paint was issued to the citizens of Bethany, and the code enforcement officer went out and started writing violations for peeling paint to clean up our city, something I ran on, and a lot of people were very upset, and I heard about it. And so on day 2, I formed the mayor's task force, because one thing I realized is there were people who physically or financially could not meet the need to handle that violation, and for whatever their issue was. And so there were several people that benefited from the mayor's task force, which were all volunteers who went in on their own dime and cleaned up properties and painted homes for those citizens. And that really showed me that that's what it is all about. It is about community. And there were many of those people who hadn't spoken to their neighbors in years, and now they are. And so that's very, very important to me. Also, it was said that, you know, our biggest asset are our people, and that is correct. We have another great asset, and that is Route 66. Like I said, we have activity going on Route 66 that has drawn the attention of the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, and it is one of their focuses for tourism. And I hope that we have not messed anything up. I hope that we can revisit this TIF and make forward progress on that. Transparency is something that I strive for and that we are striving for every single day. I will listen to anybody about anything, and I do that every single day. We are a family. We're the family of Bethany. And we can agree to disagree, and we can still love one another. We have it in our household around the dinner table some very interesting conversations, sometimes heated conversations, and we don't always see eye to eye. But at the end of dinner, we are still a family, and that's important to me. And we are the family of Bethany, and we need to do whatever we need to do to move forward. And with that, my rant is over. Item 16 is new business. Does anybody have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until May 7th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Public Works Authority. Item 1 is the consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
You want to do everything?
Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until May 7th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Hospital Trust. Item 1, consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until May 7th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Development Authority. Item 1, consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until May 7th, 2019. And with that, we are adjourned.